good.
Awesome. Yeah. So I was saying so I gave a brief introduction. You are the CTO of Grofers, and we all know Grofers. And thank you for taking out the time to talk to all of us. And we are all super excited. And I was also telling the students that you personally are very passionate about education, and you have you have also extensively contributed in the training domain, especially for software engineers, right? Generally the format which we'll follow is that there are 2-3 things to begin with. If you could cover those, I think they would be super relevant to the students. And along the way, we'll take live questions from the students as well as in when we have it. So the broader topics which we believe would be relevant would be the first one would be around how does a life of a software engineer at a product company like Grofers look like, right? Um, and the context over here is that majority of our students are going to be freshers in the industry, so it's important for them to understand that. The second topic, we can get to the second topic after we cover the first one, I guess.
Okay. Let's see how do I describe this. I think it depends on a lot of day to day. I've worked in the B2B space. I've worked in the services space, like consulting. I ran my own shop, and then now I'm in the B2C space, and they all have a lot of different flavors. Because like before I worked for a hosting company, for instance. So we were a platform as a service company. So we hosted some of the biggest sites in the world and provided 24/7 support on them and all of the deployment pipelines. And that kind of work, for instance, hosting the White House and Department of Defense and the Grammys and the Weather Channel and some of the biggest properties. That one's very different. As a software engineer, you're extremely rigorous. If you're working on the team which actually provides that platform, every single line of code has multiple code reviewers. There's exhaustive tests that happen. There's a really strict release and change process. We're hosting, major government departments in the U.S. So sometimes changes have to go through regulatory process. You have to get them reviewed by auditors and things like that. Contrast that to a place like Grofers, where the team has doubled in the last year. We went from 50 million per year dollars in sales, GMV, up to 400 million in the last 2 years, 8x increase. So that pace of growth kind of just means that engineers are expected to be very flexible. Engineers are expected to understand the business context, do a lot of experimentation, respond very quickly to change, take calculated risks around the code and the architecture, be much more involved in the business side of things and much more aware of. I don't know if that answers your question, but to start with, I would say that software engineering is really about solving business problems. It's not about software. Like you're there to solve some kind of business problem, to make some business successful. If you're not doing that, you won't have a job very soon. And depending on the business, the nature of the work also varies dramatically.
Awesome. Sounds good. So if any of the students have any question at any point, feel free to either post it on the chat or unmute yourself and ask those questions. So if you could now move on slightly to the context of, given these things and understanding, how does a interview process, which is supposed to assess for some of these qualities, how does that interview process look like in the context of Gophers, or largely in the context of other product companies? And especially, what are the key factors which, from an insider's point of view,
how to get a job at Grofers? I don't really know. I think best if you guys ask me some direct questions about that. I will say that I hire definitely a lot more for attitude than I do for experience. Someone who has demonstrated an ability to take initiative on their own, to take initiative for their own learning, to develop themselves, to not just like I passed a MOOC, I have a certification, that kind of stuff, but like a lot of projects, things people have been building, books that they've read, things to say about those books, blog posts that they've written. Anyone who's kind of clearly demonstrates not just an ability, but a willingness to go out and improve themselves and learn things on a regular basis. Especially for junior folks, that tends to make them stand out from the crowd of people who think that it's all about qualifications and blah blah blah. Like, it's not really that important.
So is this something like Gophers? I'm pretty sure that the engineering team is large right now at this point, and I'm guessing you wouldn't have time to talk to all the new hires and everything. So
Yeah.
is this the same thing which you have incorporated in the talent acquisition team as well? That these are the things they look for when they screen resumes and
Yeah. Good
is,
question. Good question. I'm not drinking wine in the afternoon. This is water. I could have been, but I'm not. Mm, um, yes and no. I think the talent acquisition sort of industry in India, and globally, but in India in particular, I think is still pretty old-fashioned. There's definitely a lot of just quickly rifling through resumes, looking for names of colleges, and kind of that's still there. So by the time it gets to us, sometimes it's filtered. But we've been pretty clear about it, that we prioritize people from non-traditional backgrounds, people of open source backgrounds. A lot of our VP engineering is from JP Institute and like that. It's not a fancy tech school, for instance. Extremely good, one of the best guys I've ever worked with. And he's brought like 3-4 people from his college who are again the like open source leaders and those kind of people. We have a lot of those hacker types. Like our head of InfoSec hacked us, right? And then we hired him to run security for us. So we definitely look for that. Our TA team knows that, and they do make efforts. We also hold a lot of open source meetups on campus. We also get a lot of our engineers to blog and to be active in the communities. And I think that's a way that we also recruit a lot, is just getting people who are interested in software to come talk to us.
So for people starting out, could you touch a bit on if you were to recommend someone how to start, first and foremost, the importance of or the relevance of things like open source contribution, writing tech blogs or live coding videos. And then for someone starting out, what would your advice be, how they should go about it?
Work your ass off.
In terms of how do they identify where?
So what I did, I'll tell you my story. I don't know, now it might be different, right? So I'm 38 now, but I left school when I was 16. And I worked all kinds of lousy jobs. I worked at a gas station, a call center. Like I didn't come from money, and I didn't have any kind of opportunity to go to college or whatnot. And then I was working as a secretary, as a temporary secretary at a school. And I went online. I was living with a midwife, and she needed to buy a scale for some of her work that she did. And she asked me, because I do a little bit about computers, that we go online. And I went online on this lousy modem, and he said, hey, I tried to buy it, but it was broken. So I called the guy, and he said, your prices are the best, but your shopping cart is terrible, and everything's broken. He says, I know, I need someone to fix it. I said, I can fix it. I said, okay, kid, I'll pay you $8 an hour. Make me a banner ad over the weekend. So I pirated Fireworks, and this like Photoshop kind of program. Spent the whole weekend, worked for like 10, 12 hours making one little stupid banner ad. I billed him for half an hour, $4. This is terrible, but I'll give you another job. And then 3 months later, I was running a couple servers, compiling PHP, MySQL, the stuff from source, learned some Python, I was learning CSS, I was making web apps. 3 months after that, I had hired a guy, and we had a little company. And 6 months after that, we had an office, and we had like 3-4 people. And that's how I got into the game. And it wasn't, and I say it like maybe I'm some kind of genius who picked it up fast. It's not that at all. It's that I really, really, really worked hard. So I probably worked 3-4 hours for every hour that I built in the beginning. I didn't focus on immediate financial gratification or like sort of anything else. I was just like, let me make sure that I'm learning, that I'm doing. I was excited about doing things in a better way than people have been doing them. It wasn't about just making the client happy. I'd make sure the client was happy, but I'd also make sure that I was using better technology, newer technology. I was doing more research. I was, learning as they went along. And I think for some people that's just natural. For some people it requires effort to develop that entrepreneurial mindset towards themselves. But I think for someone starting out, like, you're gonna have a hard time. If you apply to Grofers, most of you probably wouldn't even get through a screening process, to be honest. It's just how things are with the industry and the kind of people we're hiring. if you wanted to, the best thing to do would be to pick a project, pick something you believe in, a product you want to build, a you know, if you get some freelance work, or you guys through the program you're doing with Divyam, you get some work for a company. Like, don't just get the job done. Get the job done 3x, you know, and like do that. And it might be terrible, but do it again, do it again. It really is a lot of grinding it out, reading books, trying new things, and especially in the beginning. I think people understate how much it is just a lot of hard work if you want to leapfrog your years of experience. Really.
Makes sense. Awesome. So I think there's one question which came in. So building on your previous answer regarding business knowledge from someone who will be starting out his career in software, how does he or she work on building the understanding of business aspects? Any suggested resources? I think this has to do with the specific domain knowledge. The person. Yeah.
Interesting. So like I said, I didn't start out going to engineering college. I started out just like hustling, you know, selling projects and then delivering them. So for me, when I say business knowledge, like it's kind of always been part of it for me. I've always done the consulting part also. What are you trying to accomplish? How's the software going to get it done for you? What are the right features? I think that's the most in-demand skill, particularly in India. There's like engineers who think about the problem they're trying to solve, not about just like writing code and filing, doing tickets, right? That's extremely important. If it's also the most uh, lucrative and valuable part of the game. If you're able to be that person who's able to translate the requirements, understand what the effort is required to implement it, also understand what kind of compromises and trade-offs would be acceptable to business and what kind of risks, and can congeal that into a plan. Those people are the most valuable, and those are the people who typically rise up in management and become sort of leaders of engineering organizations. How exactly to do that? I'm not sure. Like different domains are obviously going to be different. I think the easiest way is just go find either the CEO if it's a small company or someone running whatever division and just say, hey, can we have lunch? And explain to me how your business works. They'll pull out a spreadsheet and we'll explain it. And you'll be like, oh, that's not that complicated. Most of it's not that complicated. Software is much harder. But that's the best way to learn, is just take an interest, take an active interest, I guess. I don't know what else to say there. I don't know if you're talking about like soft skills or you're talking about like specific domain sort of stuff.
I think he meant the business domain specific knowledge. So, okay, sounds good. Do we have any other questions at this point? Awesome. So you also kind of briefly mentioned that about the resume screening process at Grofers, right? So for our students that kind of worked across 3 different projects and coded like 5 to 8 hours a day at this point. What else, specifically what else in terms of open source contribution or tech blogs, what else can they do to make their profile over time stronger to get past that particular resume screening process?
Well, let me just be straight here. I don't think you should blog or get involved in open source because you're looking to get a job. If you do that, you won't do a good job at it. Like you either, sorry, pardon my language, if you either give a shit or you don't. If you really like this, if you want to be good at it, then put in the effort and you will get recognized for the effort you put in. If you put in a little bit of, if you're a little strategic around communicating that. So you have to do the work, and then it takes a little bit of extra effort to make sure you communicate the work that you're doing and to blog about it, etc. But you can't just communicate about what you've done if you've not done anything. So I think it's really,
right.
It's important that you actually like coding. If you don't like coding, you'll never really be successful.
Right,
so,
definitely.
And maybe, poking around different communities and finding the place that, fits in for you. There's different kinds of coding, right? So like, and some people are really into system engineering and they really want to work at a very low level. They really want to talk about like performance engineering. They want to understand what protocols would be the most efficient to communicate between 2 nodes. Some people are really into InfoSec, right? Like vulnerabilities in systems and automating security procedures and that kind of thing. Some people are really into usability. and like how can I create really beautiful systems and write code that allows me to do that faster. Um, so I think there's a lot of different ways to get involved, to find your way to be excited, but the most important thing is to optimize for some kind of enthusiasm. Like I play guitar also. A lot of people say, oh, I want to play guitar like you play guitar. Well, I've been playing a very long time. And they're like, oh, should I get a teacher and practice scales and whatnot? And I typically say no, like that's all good to do once you have a little experience and you want to get really good. But to start off with, you should pick a song you really like. And I think that's the most important thing. Mm. Pick a project you really like, a project you're really passionate about, something that you'll work on without feeling like it's work. That's really important. Otherwise, I don't think you'll ever really build anything worthwhile. I'm sorry, that's maybe the answer you're looking for, which is like write 3 blog posts a week. I don't think it works like that. I think passion shows through. So you come to an interview, you talk about stuff you're building. I'll give you an example. Like one of our guys, he's already a pretty senior guy with us, but he has this cool project he spends a lot of time on, totally unrelated to work. It's like generative music. So it reads in the scores of different melodies, and then it kind of uses machine learning models to say that, okay, if you have an A flat followed by a B followed by a C at this rhythm, then like the next note is probably going to be an F, and it generates new melodies, amazing stuff. Another guy is like, sort of making these interesting poetry video games on the side. So there's like that kind of thing. I think in the beginning, you really have to find your passion. And fortunately, you have the time to spend on it as opposed to later in life.
Right. Makes sense. I think that is great advice, and also great long-term advice as well, to generally think about these things from a mental framework perspective. Awesome. So I think Nanta has a question around what soft skills in a potential hire pleases you the most. But what are the soft skills like when you talk to people during the interview process or when your team talks to people? Then what are the specific soft skills they look for or you want to see in the people joining your team potentially?
I think this is very generic, but I think human beings are kind of the same everywhere you go. So I don't think there's a specific answer. The probably the biggest one where I reject candidates is their inability to listen well. So what I really want is someone who is able to actively listen, and also able, when they ask questions, they really ask a question and then they listen very carefully for the response, and just sort of having a very lucid interaction and not being afraid and not being nervous is really important. A lot of times things move very fast. And so in the real world, in the real job, you're gonna have to go to a lot of meetings and you're getting emails here and this is happening and you still have all these deadlines, and I only have time to talk to you for 30 seconds probably to be like, okay, what's up with this? Is this gonna get done? How do you feel about doing it this way, that way? We come to an agreement of how something's gonna happen. I don't wanna have to then come back a week later and realize that we're not on the same page. So that ability to listen well, if you have any doubts, connect and clarify those doubts is a really important soft skill. I think it's a little hard, maybe in the Indian context. I think there's a lot of sort of fear of authority, or sort of this, if I didn't hear it right the first time, then they'll be mad at me if I ask, which tends to be there. And I think that's something that is important to get past. It's so being able to ask questions and to listen well. Other sort of soft skills I think that are crucially important. I don't know. Obviously, like being a bit enthusiastic, being able to express, like I said, if you have a passion and it comes across, it's authentically a passion of yours, and you're enthusiastic about it, that's very infectious.
Right.
That's the kind of team that we all kind of want.
Right, makes sense. Awesome. So I think the first point which you also mentioned was specifically, I've heard this before as well. People are not open to the idea of, especially for the students, to kind of reiterate it a bit. It's important to ask questions and not be afraid of authority. But of course, there's a right way to ask questions, respecting the other person's time and articulating it in the crispest way, kind of. Um, right. Okay, awesome. So I think Maushad has a question about the right, about the. Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
The tech stack. Yeah, I see that
The
one.
tech stack, yeah.
We we're mostly a Python shop. Sorry, I'm just moving closer to my charger, letting it a juice. We're mostly a Python shop in the back end. We have some Go in different places. We have some services written in Java. Um, Front end is React Native mostly, and native Android and iOS clients. Um, and then we use Kafka for a lot of our messaging. Um, yeah, I think that's pretty much it. We have some Node. We have all kinds of stuff. I think what happens with organizations over time is, you know, for better or worse, somebody says, "Oh, I really like this new language," and then they somehow sneak in a project in that, and it's like a trial project that ends up sitting there, and then you have to move. But we're mostly Python. Yeah.
Right. So, but at the time of hiring, especially in the context of freshers, do you look for, or do you provide, is it a plus for people to have already worked on the extensively on the on, let's say, Python in your case, or are the fundamentals more important? Or
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't hurt. It's nice to have somebody who can hit the ground running. Um, particularly particularly freshers, that actually is a little more important. It's not very important to me, like as a rule. The programming language is not important at all. I worked in all of them pretty much. It's really not important. There's like certain constructs that are common. So like if you've worked in a functional programming language, other ones going to make sense. If you've done enterprise architecture in Java, like enterprise architecture in Python will be pretty much the same. There'll be message buses, there'll be caches, there'll be different things, there'll be different names. It'll be pretty much the same constructs. Um, However, if you're so junior that you don't know these concepts yet, then it can be a bit tough to say, okay, now I have to come in and learn a whole new language. If you've barely learned one language, the more languages you learn, the easier it is to learn a new one. Like before, it took me forever. Now it's you just have a mental model, and you're like, all right, this is this, and this is that, and this is that. Fine. I would say it doesn't really matter that much, but it definitely is a plus, right?
right,
To know the things.
it makes sense. So Viva has a question that if someone wants to, and do you guys have product managers?
Yeah,
At Gophers? Okay.
yeah, many.
So if someone wants to transition from eng to product management, I guess, or some
Yeah.
other product role, then what is the general path which you have seen?
Different people. Product is a really weird role because it sort of like doesn't mean anything and is like really important at the same time. So like people from product, like what I mean doesn't mean anything is that what product managers do varies a lot depending on the team and depending on the organization, way more than engineers. Um, in a company like Grofers, our product managers, most of them have more of a business background because they sort of their goal is to say, okay, our team is the new user acquisition team, right? So we're optimizing for the cost to acquire customers, bringing that down, and the number of new customers acquired every month. And then they look at different ways that can be done. They work with marketing a lot, talk about different schemes and promotions and social campaigns and referral programs and that kind of thing, which will drive us more traffic at a lower cost. If you take a company like, say, like, I don't know, let's talk about like, what's a software company that everyone here would kind of know? I don't want to go too big, but I was thinking like browser stack or something. Like GitHub. Let's take GitHub, for instance, right? Like GitHub, you guys have all used GitHub, I assume? Yeah.
Yeah.
So like GitHub, there's probably a product manager who looks after like social and sharing and starring and all that kind of thing, right? Getting people to communicate more and all that kind of stuff, right? Forums and issue queues, whatever things that make people communicate. There's probably a product manager for that. That person is definitely looking at business metrics, but they're probably looking also a lot at the software architecture itself, the platforms that they're building. If you go more hardcore, like there's probably a product manager for the synchronization routines on GitHub that like quickly synchronize between all their thousands and thousands of servers, right? There's probably a product for that. There's some eventual consistency software which handles all of that collaboration. there's probably a product manager for that. And that product manager's stakeholders are other engineering teams, probably, or infrastructure teams. They're not end customers at all. And so they'll be much more like planning software, thinking about what sort of APIs to expose, as opposed to a user acquisition team product manager at Grofers, who's actually like running campaigns themselves and going out and meeting customers and really that kind of stuff. So I think there's very different ways to get to product. Some product managers come from a business background, some come from a design UX background, some come from an engineering background. All of those skills are useful. It just depends like what quantity of them you need. You need certain percentage of each one to do the job. Because you have to interface to designers and engineers and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So I would say that's what that is. But the quickest path to a product role is actually not engineering at all. It's business.
Right. Right, makes sense. So I'm guessing at Grofers, you guys mostly hire people who either have MBAs or who have already worked in the business domain, given the job which you described.
Oh, look. I mean, it's India, so most people have engineering degrees anyway, whether they actually do it or not. So, but yeah, I think it's all over the map. Like one of our senior product managers he's awesome. Does a really good job. He was a software engineer at Microsoft. Another one came from our design team. Another one is like an IAM kind of dude. So it's all over the place.
Okay. So we have a question. Can we incorporate machine learning functionality in a web application, like incorporate something like, say, how we implement an API or use a library also from a... Hey, Munish, do you want to mute your audio and ask the question? So it's a lengthy kind of a thing that might be easier.
Yes.
Sure, yeah, go for it.
Hello. Yeah, so my question is can we incorporate machine learning functionality in a web application, like kind of how we use, like how we are implementing a library or how we implement APIs? Because many of the web as well as mobile applications nowadays, which are the top applications, they are using some sort of these things. And looking at it from a perspective of a web software engineer or a web developer, like you have some functionalities like, say, recommendation engines and smart search engines like Google or Bing. So of these, they say that they use all these terms like machine learning, AI, deep learning, data science. They use it all together. So it's very confusing to distinguish between what is actually used. So in to rephrase everything, my basic question is that is there work going on in your knowledge, which is like is there like any work going on, like a web developer with very, say, minimal or very almost zero knowledge of machine learning or data science or anything can incorporate these things in his application? That is my first question. And my second question is that if a software developer has to learn these skills, then out of machine learning, AI, deep learning, and data science, which one of this skill would be most relevant for him to learn, to incorporate in the day-to-day, to his incorporate into his day-to-day work, specifically for the application only, not for the overall thing?
So Manish, I'm sort of not, I'm not exactly getting where you're coming from.
I think the first question he said was, is at this point machine learning commoditized enough that an application development can directly use commoditized models?
Well, what do you think?
I think to a decent extent, for things like get things off the ground, yes, and over time it is getting more and more. Of course, after a particular stage, to get the last 10-20% optimizations, you need to have an in-depth understanding and work on it. That is my take on it, but I think people want to hear your take on it.
Well,
And then the second question was that if a person is to start learning about things like machine learning, or I think you mentioned data science and AI, then what would be the best way to go about it?
okay. This isn't an area that I'm an expert in. Like I said, there's all kinds of different software developers, right? I've done some basic data science courses online and stuff. I wouldn't say I've never done that kind of work in a professional capacity. I probably wouldn't give you the best answer on where to learn it. I think I mean, my answer for learning anything is usually like pick a project, read a book, try to figure it out, ask for help online. You know, I think that's kind of the same whatever you're learning. I did one which is called I forget the name of it right now. You have to pay for it beyond a point. It's an online course. I thought it was pretty good, but I'm forgetting the name of it right now. It was a few years ago. I can't find it. I'll send it later. In terms of the commodification, yeah, I mean, certainly, like, and that's been the case for a long time. Like, we're implementing AWS personalized right now on Grofers. We have data science people. We had our own recommendation algorithm. We could do it ourselves. It's not really worth it. Like, it's a pretty generic application. It makes sense just to do it. I think a lot of times right now, there's all this hype around data science, and rightfully so, because the ability to make decisions based on data is absolutely the competitive advantage for most organizations. However, it's the idea that you need to do like groundbreaking research on it is very flawed. 90% of it is just cleaning up the data you have. Most data science is just data plumbing. And once you clean up your data, like most generic algorithms will kind of do the work. So I think absolutely there's no reason not to use such algorithms. I think most people call themselves data scientists. They're just cutting and pasting algorithms right now. There's very few people writing new ones, what do you think, in my experience.
Awesome, makes sense. Monish, I hope that answers your question.
Yes.
So I think I think we already addressed the part where Jacob also said they had people from who were software engineers at Microsoft now at product in Gophers. So maybe MBA is not necessary. I think that got answered. So Karthik has a question that how Grofers differs from other online grocery stores. This is a bit of a company specific question, but yeah.
I think we skipped Shadok also, but so Karthik is saying grocery stores. Our philosophy is very clear, which is that India is a country where the majority of people spend the majority of their money on their daily needs. Most people in India are poor, and to reduce the amount of money they spend on their daily needs is their number one priority in life, because when they can reduce that, then they can spend it on things they want, like better education, like luxury products, like better transportation, better housing, more security for old people, whatever the things that are important to people. You know, spending X on Maggie is not. They'd much rather spend less money. How do we get people to spend less money? We basically have to economize supply chain. All of the big FMCG, fast-moving consumer goods producers like Nestle, Hindustan Unilever, etc. They spend a lot of their money on marketing and a lot of their money on supply chain. So because there's several distributors in between the manufacturer and the customer, including the kirana shop, the distributor before that, the wholesaler before that, as well as the fact that they have to then go bring people to each kirana shop and say, ye dal do, wo dal do, like put this, you know, and sort of do all that. They spend money on all of that stuff. We can go direct to customer with our own products, and we can sell the same quality at a much cheaper rate. And so that's what we set the whole business around. We also sell all the big brands, but our focus is really on developing our own brands and making it really cheap. Now, the problems with that is that it's funny when I go to a party and I'm like, oh, I work at Grofers, and everyone says, oh, I like Big Basket better. He said, yeah, you should, because you know, you're at a party with me, which means you're probably rich, right? So at least people in India think they're middle class. There's no middle class in India. But if you're making over 50,000, over 30,000 rupees a month, you're kind of in the upper echelon of Indian economics, right? And they're like, you know, yeah, it's for them it makes sense. But we realized that we used to offer 90-minute delivery. We used to offer fruits and veg and all kinds of different products, and you know, a bunch of chocolates and flowers and cosmetics and all this stuff. What we realized was that people are very willing to wait 2-3 days for their groceries. They're very willing for it to make some mistakes here and there. They're very willing. We only sell 1,500 products. We used to sell 30,000. Big Basket sells about 20,000. We sell, or now they sell about 8,000 because they're kind of copying us. We sell like 2,000. So because we sell fewer products, we have less assortment, but it means our supply chain is more efficient. So I think some of the things that wealthier people want, like high assortment and faster delivery times and all that kind of thing, we don't offer those, and because it allows us to be more efficient in offering what we do offer. And that's what kind of differentiates us. And we decided to go after the mass market. We feel like that's where the real opportunity is in India, is that segment of people.
Makes sense. Awesome. So to go over Shahruk's question, what's the best book you have read this year, and what's your all-time favorite book?
I like this question. This is really good. It's impossible for me to answer. I have all-time favorite, I think. I think a book I really enjoyed was Norwegian Wood by Murakami. I read that this year, fiction. It's really good.
Sorry, what's the name of the book? Norwegian. I'll just
Norwegian Wood. Yeah. In terms of nonfiction, I really enjoyed *Sapiens*. I thought that was a really good book. I recommend that. And Norwegian Wood.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. And in terms of one, which I think is a really good book for anyone starting on in the software career, I could say two, which are really good. One is The Pragmatic Programmer by Dave Thomas. The Pragmatic Programmer really has great fundamentals of software engineering and design architecture, and it's funny. Another really good one is, okay, I'll give three. One is Pragmatic Programmer. The other one is User Story Mapping by Jeff Patton. That's probably my favorite book on agile software development, requirements gathering. If you want to do product, Jeff Patton's the guy. He's the best. And the third one, there's an author named Camille Fournier, I think your last name is. She was the CTO of Rent the Runway in New York City. And she wrote a book called The Manager's Path. And even if you're not planning to go into management right now, every chapter kind of shows the progression of a software developer's career into management. So it starts off with you're a junior developer and you're a trainee. And then it's like, okay, you're like a sort of confirmed full-time developer, and maybe you're mentoring some other new folks. And then you're sort of an engineering manager for one, tech lead for one team. Then you're an engineering manager for several teams. Then you're like an engineering director in your department. And then like chapter 9 or whatever is CTO. I really like that book. It gives you sort of not just it's not like a technical how-to, but it's more of an organizational how-to. Like what are the kind of things that are going to be expected of you? What is your boss going through? What are you thinking about? So I find that one's going to be really helpful.
Awesome. So the last one was The Manager's Path, right?
Path.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. So I think we'll take a couple of last questions because we agree for 40 minutes and we know you're busy. So let's see. I think we have done this. What advice would you give on learning programming? I think you have spoken about that already a bit, like hustling and trying.
And just I wanted to add on this. Apart from this, while you have been learning, any advices you would give to speed up the learning curve, and any mistakes which you made, you felt that should not be, any mistakes or any roadblocks which you faced which kind of hampered the learning curve, and that would help us avoid the same thing.
I think it depends a lot on who you work with. So I've always been fiercely independent, and like I said, I started on my own. I just hustled my first job and built I've been the boss my career. It's a bit funny. I've not really, and it wasn't until I wrote a piece of software. It was acquired by a company called Acquia about 12 years ago, and I joined there as an engineer, as an early, not quite 12 years, 10 years ago, maybe a little more. And I joined there pretty early as a developer, and I wasn't. So two things happened there. One is I had a manager who was much more senior than me. And I learned a lot of things from him about management, not about software. The other one is that I had 3-4 guys on my team. I was always the big fish in the small pond. I worked for different companies, and I would always get it quick, and I'd quickly get promoted, and then I'd be running a project or something like that, and everyone looked at me like, wow, Jacob's a really great guy. And then I went there, and the guys there was one guy with a PhD in biomechanics from Princeton, another one with a PhD in astronomy from Cornell, another dude who used to lead a team at Sun. And I was all of a sudden the kid, and I didn't know shit. And it was a good experience. My first code reviews were brutal, and it hurt me a lot. So especially early in your career. Like, there's different between like the self-motivated stuff you got to do. I was talking about that before. Do whatever you can do, just get a lot of practice and keep reading things and keep learning things. Find your passion, find something you want to do. But then when you get a job, like, don't optimize for money, don't optimize for a name, optimize for how much your ass is going to get kicked in a code review. Like, that's what you want to optimize for. You will accelerate your learning dramatically if you just find the kind of people who are really brutal with your code reviews. That's the best way to learn, in my opinion.
Makes sense. Great. I think as a last question, and this is very relevant, especially in the context. So Ruhan has this question, as English isn't the native language. So what do you think about
How much
what level of fluency do you expect from people?
Yeah, this is a tough one. क्योंकि मुझे भी हिंदी आती है, मतलब काफी time से यहाँ पे रहता था. But I think I have a high bias actually for fluent English, which I try to check. Definitely, if someone's very fluent in English and eloquent, I give them more benefit of the doubt. I probably instantly give them more respect. And this is messed up. It's not fair. It's not the way society should work. It's the way it works for everybody, not just me. And so I don't, it's not a bias that I'm proud of, but that I think should be there. And a lot of our best developers are not great English speakers. And I think it's important to check that. I try to check it. That being said, for better or worse, it's not the language of meetings a lot of times, but it's definitely the language of documentation. It's definitely the language of proposals. It's the language of presentations. And if you're going to be successful with any large organization or an organization with international presence, you're going to need to improve your English. It's not fair, it's not right, but it's certainly true. That a lot of being a successful software developer is not writing code. A lot of it is convincing other people of things. And to do that, writing well is extremely important. And if the writing has to be in English, then that's in English. There's a guy I used to work with who was phenomenal. In fact, you guys would you probably enjoy doing this with him more than me. His name is Tanesai, and he was my first hire at Akuya when I started up the India office. We worked together for 4 years. He wrote me a cover book. Like, he sent me an 18-page PDF of like, here's my cover letter. Like, how his whole life's journey has led up to this point where I'm going to hire him. And I did, which was weird because it was a bit creepy, but it was the best decision I ever made, probably. And he was from a fairly, low and middle class, working class family in Andhra. Only spoke Telugu up until he was 18 years old. He went to VIT, and it was at VIT, he watched a bunch of American movies, and he learned English. And he was still bumbling. Like, he'd get up, he was very underconfident, he'd stutter a lot, he was a bit of a thick accent. And I'd send him in to go to Accenture and do like a 1 week, 2 week consulting engagement with Accenture, training all the developers, doing all this intake. And he'd do that, and then he'd come back and he'd write this absolutely perfect 40-page report, which didn't have a single grammatical error. And I was like, who's doing this? How are you pulling it in like a weekend, And he worked very hard. But also he had this trick he would do where he would highlight the text and he'd hit a key combination and it'd repeat back at 4x speed in his earphones or 3x or whatever, the English, and he would catch his grammatical errors. He did that for every email he wrote, everything he did. He had like mentors he had signed up in the past, and anytime he was unsure, he would send them this thing and say, will you please check my English, and he'd fix it. And then vocabulary words, he'd have a notepad where he'd note them down. And then the weekend he would do it. So, if you want to, you can. And it's that kind of effort you need. Now, then he went on to run the engineering team for me here. And he was like incredibly effective at it. But it's gotta work.
Awesome. Makes sense. So I think that is some great piece of advice that listening to your text might help you catch the grammatical errors faster. And then we also have things like Grammarly to automate a few of these written grammatical errors these days.
And ask someone to be your mentor. Like what he did is he asked someone, he said, can I send you things? And the person said yes, which I think is like most people would say yes. Find someone you know has good English and ask them like, can I send you an email to proofread for me, that kind of thing. He would also even send the email, but also send it to his friend, being like, "You check this later and tell me."
Awesome. Sounds good, Jacob. So we're already at around 12:50.
Okay.
So thanks for taking out the time. Any last piece of advice you have for our students? So just for some context, at this point, we have students across three batches. The latest one started around a month back, and the oldest one is about
Okay.
to be graduating sometime in September. Right. So do you have? So there are different points in the journeys. Um, and as you know, we try to focus on both fundamentals of hard skills as well as life skills. I'm not trying to sell, but I'm just saying. So, any last piece of advice for people who are going to be starting their career in software engineering?
Um, yeah, I would say the most important decision you can make is who you spend time with. Like I think I said it before, but be really choosy about who you spend time with. Like, and don't optimize for money in the short term. Do not do it. Like if you have a job that pays you 20,000 rupees a month, but you get to work with somebody who can really invest in you and will really show you stuff right now, it's worth way more than a job that'll pay you a lakh a month. And just don't undersell yourself. Get paid. I'm saying, but especially early in your career, optimizing for the people you're going to spend time with, and how much they're willing to invest in you, and how much independence and responsibility you'll get to make your mistakes and to learn, should be absolutely top priority. And be really choosy about that. And if you're not getting that, make sure you ask for it. And if you ask for it, you're still not getting it, then find a place to give it to you. So that's really what makes you. That helps.
Awesome. Sounds good, Jacob. Hopefully, this was helpful for everyone. And thanks again for taking out the time to talk to us.
My
Thank
pleasure.
you.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye. Should I just end the meeting? I think I'll just go ahead and end the meeting for everyone. Right? Yeah.